Back when I was a kid, the Sega Genesis was known for its sports games. In particular, its collection of football games was famous. Now, there are some games that I like better than others, but really, the only way to truly experience the Genesis football games is to go back and just play them one by one. And the really interesting thing is that the first game wound up being the most famous series. John Madden Football came out on the Genesis in November 1990, making it the first Sega Genesis football game. John Madden Football came out right before the Christmas 1990 shopping season. It beat Joe Montana Football to the punch by about 2 months. Well, as usual, I was a little bit confused by how the timing behind this worked, so I did a little bit of research, and yeah, it's clear that the original Joe Montana Football missed the 1990 Christmas season by a few weeks. This advertisement was printed in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on November 21st, 1990. It's a shame that the real Madden cover didn't look like this. Anyway, as you can see, the Sega Genesis was pretty expensive back in those days, $190. Now, Joe Montana Football is the game that got the real big advertising push from Sega, mostly because it was the in-house game. There were ads for Madden as well, though that game didn't quite get the same amount of attention. Widespread video game articles like this old United Press International Wire story didn't mention Madden at all. Instead, the article focused on the Joe Montana game, and there is a bit in here about that game being delayed until January. In other words, Madden had Christmas all to himself. There was no other Genesis football game available in Christmas 1990. It was Madden or some other sport. But, to really give you an idea of how good or bad the game was, we need to look at it in the context of other football games from that time. You probably already know about Tecmo Bowl on the NES, which came out in February 1989. Tecmo Bowl is not perfect, but it is really playable and was absolutely the best home football game at the time. It certainly is a lot better than games like Play Action Football for the NES, or that awful NFL game by LJN. That one's basically unplayable. Tecmo Bowl has a nice arcade feel to it and is pretty fast. But on the negative side, you can't customize anything and you've only got 4 plays. Now, in terms of Sega consoles, Walter Payton Football for the Sega Master System was the leading football game of its time. This game is actually pretty good, though it can be hard to get used to. In particular, the computer snaps the ball basically as soon as the play is called, which will probably catch you by surprise. Anyway, it's a pretty good 8-bit football game, though it's nowhere near as playable as the original Tecmo Bowl. And, well, that's pretty much what Madden's competition was at the time. I mean, even in terms of computer football games, there was not much out there. We've already talked about XOR NFL Challenge, of course. By 1990, this game was still the best computer football simulation, even though it was 5 years old. Micro League Football came out in 1990, and in my opinion, it doesn't even compare. And then you've got the original Madden computer game. The MS-DOS version of Madden came out in 1988, and it's just awful. Seriously, don't play this game. The old Apple II version from 1987 is even worse in my opinion. This, at the beginning, is seriously the best part of the whole game. Anyway, as bad as that game is in retrospect, there is an interesting story behind it. The man behind Madden Football was this guy, Trip Hawkins. Hawkins was a fan of Stratomatic's card and dice football game and started creating football sims of his own when he was young. He founded Electronic Arts after leaving Apple back in 1982. He decided to sign Madden as a spokesperson and consultant right from the start with his eyes on creating his football sim. But that was in 1982. The game itself didn't actually come out until 1988. Yeah, it was kind of vaporware for all of those years. Now, Hawkins gets a lot of praise, especially from the Stratomatic community, for being one of us, but the truth is that he was not a particularly good businessman. He founded 3DO afterwards, for example. The 3DO was incredibly expensive and had a pretty poor lineup of games. When the PlayStation came out in the mid-1990s, the 3DO was toast. And the Madden games that you and I know and love actually had nothing to do with Hawkins, believe it or not. By the time the really good versions came out, 92, 93, 94, and so on, Hawkins was long gone from Electronic Arts. Anyways, you can see here, the first version of Madden for the Genesis is a vast improvement over the old computer game. Now, the highlight of this game is play calling. There are 35 offensive plays to choose from. There are also 64 different defensive plays to choose from. That's a lot more than Tecmo Bowl, right? I mean, Tecmo Bowl gave you 4 plays per team. Walter Payton Football was a little bit better. They gave you about 12, not counting all the special team stuff. But seriously, Madden was a lot deeper than any of the other games on the market at the time. Play calling is also pretty easy to understand. On offense, you choose your set of players first. You then choose the formation. And then finally, you choose the play. Normal means 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and 2 running backs. Fast means 4 wideouts and a backup running back. Hands is apparently designed for passing, where you need a running back to help block. And big is mostly there for goal line type formations. On defense, you can choose between cover and read strategies. And you've got some formations, though it's not perfect. Notably, there is no 3-4, which is crazy because everybody used the 3-4 in 1990. The design behind this game was not perfect, and this is where you can see that John Madden really only had a consulting role in how the game was created. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Madden wouldn't have left out the 3-4 defense. Anyway, the game itself is surprisingly easy. When you're on offense, you push C to snap the ball. You also use C to bring up the passing window. After you throw it to a receiver, you push B to get control of the receiver, and then you just catch the ball and you run. The C button lets you put your hands up to catch the ball, though I found that I didn't really have to push it most of the time. It was pretty straightforward. Defense is pretty similar. You use B to choose the guy closest to the ball. C will have you jump or raise your hands. A has you dive. Now, I was able to intercept the ball a few times. When that happens, the screen changes sides suddenly and without any warning, which is kind of surprising. I also ran into a strange fumble glitch where all my defenders basically disappeared. Like I said, this game is not perfect, but it really isn't that bad. It certainly is a lot more playable than the Walter Payton Football game was, and that game was also pretty good for its time. I wasn't able to get much going with the running game. However, passing was a breeze. Now that might be because I was playing at San Francisco. Anyway, the game keeps in-game stats for you for the game you're playing, which is nice. However, there's no season mode. The season mode here really is just an exhibition game. Anyway, like I said, it's not a bad game, though there were some things that really drove me nuts. The biggest problem is that it takes the computer forever to call an offensive play. The next problem is all the time you spend waiting for the players to get back. There's a lot of dead time in this game, and it feels like it takes an eternity to get through a single game. The sound is okay, but we really could have used some in-game music. You can see those slowdown problems in other early Electronic Arts sports games like Bulls vs. Blazers. Now, I know some people love this basketball game, but it's just way too slow for me. The first Madden has similar issues with the game engine just being way too sluggish for serious play. Now, they fixed some of this stuff in the series over time, though I would argue that the Madden games have always felt lethargic. I think there's been too much emphasis on making the games realistic and not enough on making them, engaging. But then again, I might be one of the few people who feel this way. Well, the first Madden game was really well received by the video game press. I mean, just check out this review from Electronic Gaming Monthly, almost a perfect score. Unfortunately, GamePro only provided a little paragraph and no serious review. Over in the UK, Mean Machines gave this game an absolutely stellar review. They called it an absolute must for sports fans, and this is coming from reviewers who admitted that they weren't interested at all in American football. Now, do I think it's that great? Well, not really, but then again, I'm biased since I've spent a lot of time playing games like Tecmo Super Bowl. Well, Tecmo Super Bowl is fast and has the right feel to it. It's also a lot easier to see what is happening on the line. In Madden, the line always feels chaotic, especially if you try to run. Of course, Madden's competition was actually games like Tecmo Bowl, and Tecmo Bowl is not quite as polished as its sequel. In that sense, I can see why the reviewers loved Madden so much. There are a lot of things that it just does right. I mean, Madden, the original Madden, is a great game for its time, sure, but to be honest, I don't see myself playing this one more than just once in a while. There are much better games in this series. Anyway, what do you think?